Welcome, everyone. And we have some big news for the week. And I want to have a live stream about this because I've been getting a lot of these questions from my sellers, my buyers. And what is that topic today? The National Association of Realtors has had a settlement for $418 million. And there is all these articles that you're seeing. You see the end of the buyer agent. You see the 6% commission, no more. You see home buyers will have more affordability. Their dream of owning a home is more likely today. And there is a lot of myths out there, and there's a lot of articles. And as you all know that have been tuning in, you've been watching this for a while. I started this channel 4 years ago, right when COVID happened, because when COVID happened, there was so much misinformation about real estate. Are people actually buying or not? What's likely to happen in real estate? And this is arguably one of the biggest news articles of certainly since my channel has started 4 years ago. And as you can see, every week I've been releasing content, my thoughts about how this will impact things. And I'm going to be tuning in right now to go over a little bit of the background about it. How did it get to this point? We're then going to talk about a lot of different things, like how does this actually impact home buyers? How does it impact home sellers? What should you do if you're considering to buy or sell a home? Now, the fact is, no one has all of the answers yet, because even though the news articles absolutely blew up, it was still a proposal. So there may be a lot of variations that may occur of this. The timing may be changed, but in general, it is leaning towards one direction, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But this is a live stream, so if you're tuning in live, I appreciate you guys. Feel free to have this engaging. I'm happy to answer and address everything. I've been always very transparent about real estate, the data. This is part of the show. It's always about the data itself and just the transparency and my feedback of it. Now, a little bit of background for those that you're new or that you're tuning in, a little recap. In the last 5 years, myself and my team have helped over 200 people with their moves in the Bay Area. So every week, we have been getting people into contract. And the first and most important thing when it comes to commissions, whether it's on the selling side or the buyer side, it has always been negotiable, right? There is no fixed amount. At the end of the day, you always had a choice what you wanted to do. Now, there is also a price to pay for what you want to do, right? Like there are no shortage of agents out there that can do things at a flat fee. On the sell side, heck, on the sell side, you can just for sale by owner. You don't even need an agent. You can just do it straight up yourself. On the buy side, you could have done it yourself. Now, there's obviously a lot of problems and a lot of hurdles that you have to deal with yourself, especially when you're making this purchase once every couple of years or once every so decades. But you can always have done it yourself, and no different from the agent perspective. There are agents that were doing it for a discount, for very little, right? And then there was also agents that, quite frankly, were charging even more because there is a level of service and expertise that some were charging. But now it's going to be a lot more transparent, and you're going to have more options in a sense, which is actually good and bad. And I'm going to explain why, and you will see it for yourself. So let's take a look first at the headline articles, because there's many. Whatever you type, there's going to be lots of articles, because this is as seismic of a thing when it comes to real estate as there is, which is absolutely true. There is no disagreement on this being one of the biggest impacts that there is. Now, the question you may have is how will it unfold and what will actually happen? So let's kind of go over briefly. And I think this does a decent job that of what the lawsuit was about, at least of the overall industry. So this is not just me. This is not my brokerage. It's the whole industry. And so let's just review this a little bit, right? So what were the NAR lawsuits about? High level TLDR. It's a little bit complicated, but the basis of the recent lawsuits boiled down to the group's MLS co-op compensation rule, which was introduced in the 90s in response to calls from consumer protection advocates for buyer representation. According to the rule, in order to list a for sale property on an MLS, the database agents use to share properties among themselves. By the way, it's actually a good thing that there's a central database. Otherwise, it could be crazy fragmented. So there is clearly pros about that. You would not have Redfin, Zillow, these platforms if there was no central database. So they must offer a commission to the agent who ultimately brings in the winning buyer. Historically, this has resulted in a 5% to 6% total commission, with half going to the seller's agent and half to the buyer's agent. Here's the catch though. The buyer doesn't pay their agent's fee directly. Instead, the commission is fully paid by the seller as part of their closing costs. According to the recently settled lawsuit, as well as other litigation, this amounts to a form of antitrust, allegedly reducing competition and pushing up commissions higher than the services warrant. While NAR agreed to settle the suits against it, the group has made it clear it denies any wrongdoing, so on and so forth. So that is kind of high level of how it occurred. So what does that mean to kind of break it down for you? So if you were historically as a seller, you'll be working with a listing agent, and the listing agent, you would determine what the percent is. And it's not just a flat fee percent, right? There's different things that people may offer. Like I offer a package. I offer actually different packages. One could be with photos and videos and the sales and marketing that comes to it. And another comes with, like, I cover staging, which is not a cheap thing. Staging costs $4,000 to $8,000. So that's another component. Another component could be funding some repair work upfront. So I help the clients. We didn't fund the work, but we completely managed the entire project. We picked the finishes. We gave them all the ideas to do for the home. We did the renovations for it, right? So like there's additional services there. There could be post services. Some can offer inspection reports. Some can offer whatever it may be. The idea is there's a lot of different things that are configured outside of just a pure price. On the buyer's side, there is generally a market value of what people historically has done in different areas. And it has always ranged. There have been some that did 1% for buyers. There are some that do 3% for buyers. Now, over time, just like anything else, it has been shrinking down. So the percentages have decreased. But in general, there is some level of range. Now, does that mean that the buyer didn't have the ability to negotiate that? The answer is no. If you work with a platform like a Redfin has always charged like less. They're either rebated to you or they're doing something else. But how does Redfin do this? Just think about it. Is it just the agent is willing to work for a lot less? Kind of, in its own ways, right? How do they do it for less? They did it for less by having salaried employees as salespeople, and then Redfin may just try to do it in volume. Now, we've all talked about it for many, many times. There is many pros and cons with a salaried salesperson. Look at any tech company. Look at any company. Are they as motivated or are they as good as those that is on a pure commission? There is no salary. Whether they do a lot or they do little is entirely based off of how much they perform and do. The reality is, historically, it's been proven time and time again. That's why you don't see too many salaried sales roles. Because why would I want to work harder? Like my coworker does half the amount, and I make what, 10% more, right? So that's always been the history of that model. But they are able to do that, and to be fair, they spend a lot of money on marketing, a lot of money on ads. They're going to keep pumping that out, and their objective is to do velocity. Now, they have cut a lot of people, like a lot of other companies have, when the transaction volume is down, because they can't do that anymore. So like that's an example. There are individuals in certain markets that have always credited a lot. So people ask, look, can you credit me 1%, 1.5%? Like there's plenty of people that ask that. But think about it. Why did they do that in the beginning? There's usually a reason. They have no knowledge or value prop, so they're giving their own money away in the hopes of just getting clients. But that's like anything, right? Think about any business. You can do all sorts of things. You can be a fast food chain, so you're just trying to make it up in volume, right? But then you just have low prices. You can also be a more of a high-end establishment. It's all about service. Both of them can work, just depending on the volume and what ultimately works and who the demographic in that clientele will look like, right? So there's always options. Everything has always been negotiable. And at least with the previous model, and quite frankly, the existing model, it hasn't changed yet, by the way. It's not going to change until July at the very earliest. But with the existing model, if you felt like there was more and the agent agrees to it, like you can get some money as to be used towards other things like closing cost or whatever it may be. Because that's very important when it comes to these articles of like, is the buyer, who's winning here? Is it really the buyer or is it the seller that's actually doing better? Or quite frankly, was it the lawyers that have made a lot of money based off of the dollar amount of this lawsuit? Right now, I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to go into that side of things. I don't represent EXP from the overall company side of it. This is my own personal opinion of just like how I see it, kind of a macro side of things. And as I mentioned, a lot of things may change. So if there's anything more material that changes, I will do another video with just my general thoughts. But as of basically the information from Friday, and a lot of things are still unraveling, there is still some level of consistency that things are likely to go towards. And let's break that down. So one of the great sites for information has been Broke Agent Media, so BAM. So there's a few things that we do know right now from the terms. One of the things that I brought up is there is no more co-op requirement. So there used to be a line item. Let me just show you this. So let's just see. I'm just going to pick a random home just so you can see what I'm talking about. So in general, the things that will change, there's no more co-op requirements. And what is a co-op? That's basically the buyer's commission, right? So the buyer's commission has historically always been labeled publicly. And let's just bring it up here so you can see. So I just pulled up a random home, right? So there's a line item that says the buyer's agent fee, and it's always been public, right? So this information has been public. It could be 2%, could be 1%, could be a flat amount, could be 2.5, could be 3%, whatever it may be. It has always been there. So there's some level of like a buyer's agent fee that is there, right? So the idea though is this will no longer be even listed. So there will be no line item at all for an agent to enter it. Now, the story is though, on the back end within agent to agent, there may be an area, which is we call it private agent to agent remarks, that we could still advertise it that way. That's still going to be a TBD. But the idea is that the requirement is not required anymore. It is up to the seller if they want to grant that option or not. And there is no more buyer comp line item. So that is the key. Now, how can this be structured? So if you think about it from a seller's perspective, does it make any material difference for, let's say you own a home, and let's say your home is worth $1 million. Does it make any difference for you if you had $1 million offer that had zero co-op, right? Or if you had a 1.025 and you had a 2.5% buyer co-op? As long as the net is virtually the same or is the same, then there is no material difference, right? So the idea is that has always been available. So in the past, when interest rates were higher and the market was a lot softer, because this is a supply and demand kind of thing, there were people that were saying, look, I'm going to give you $1 million offer, but I want $10,000 as seller credits that I can then use to lower my closing cost or to buy down my rates, right? Like these were all just individual terms that anyone could have done, because it made no difference for the seller side as long as they knew what the total net was. Now, so in a hotter market, then like anything else, it's just a term that's part of the equation. And I'm going to tell you how that impacts sellers a little bit once it gets rolled out. But that's a part of the difference that was always there, but now that will be then pretty much potentially as a term or a line item that will be there for virtually every offer. So that's that. Buyers will need to be required now to sign a buyer rep form if they want to have a private showing. So in the past, like quite frankly, for me, like a lot of my clients, like we did it all on trust. Like I want to earn for your business. I want to work for you guys. I want to say, look, you're so happy. I don't need anything in writing. Kind of like I don't need a prenup for us to work together. I want to work with you. And I hope you can respect that. And I'm going to earn that trust every day. But unfortunately now by law, you need a prenup, right? By law, you need this contract. So now it's different. So that is a completely different thing now. Now, you can still go to open houses publicly, but if you want to schedule a private tour, because many of you want a private tour, you don't want to be like busting shoulders, getting bombarded by the listing agent, like talking to random strangers. Like you may not want that. So if you want a private experience, you are now required to sign a buyer rep form to even do any showings. And that's a big difference. Now, for any of you that are watching that have bought with me in the past or remember those days of COVID, there used to be a form that you had to sign, which was a PEAD, which was like a permission to entry form because of COVID and the liabilities, things like that. I wasn't a buyer for it, but this is now something that's required to be able to go see places. And to be fair, and as I mentioned in the beginning, commissions are and have always been negotiable. Like that has never changed. So this fallacy that everybody was stuck with a number, that it was just some fixated number and you had no choice, was completely inaccurate. And I'm not sure how they got away with that or that messaging, but clearly, if you saw that all those articles, you would have been like, yeah, I had no choice. No. Everybody has always had choices, but that's something that you all have been educated about. There is a price to pay for different things. You can always get discount things. You can always pay for more. Now that will be a lot more apparent. So the key now is moving forward, right? Who then pays the buyer agent? So let's say I'm helping you buy a place. As I mentioned before, you had option one, which is still the seller. You still have it wrapped into the contract as a term of the offer. Number two, it may be the buyer. Let's say the seller's like, look, I do not want to pay buyers agents anything. It's going to be a straight up zero. So there's an agreement that has to be done in advance because you don't want to have this agreement when you're about to make an offer. Like this was already part of the buyer's agreement. And so the buyer consultation and this strategy is like, what do you get with working with me as a buyer agent versus somebody else? Like, what are the services, pre and post service, right? So there may be either a flat amount, it could be a percent still. That's all case by case. That'll be ironed out with the individual agent. Or it could be a combination of both, right? Let's say as a collective group, I say, look, my services are 2.5%. Okay, we agree upon that. The seller's like, look, max I'm going to give you is 1%. So as long as the buyer understands, like, look, they have to make up the delta of 1.5, then that could also work, right? So it could be both. So those are how it will play out. Now, the reason why I want to bring this up is, does this really help? The buyer side? Like the answer is, how does this help the buyer side at all? Like you may have to pay, even if I was like just a cheap broke discount agent or something. Sorry, not broke, discount agent. Like you would then have to pay extra anyways, right? This is money that's straight out of your pocket from a closing cost perspective, right? And so that's the thing. Like there is virtually no scenario that this is beneficial to buyers. You can argue that it could be beneficial for sellers, right? Because the sellers can pay less now and they can net more. So if the buyer agency side keeps shrinking, like the percent, or now the buyer has to pay the agent, like why does a seller need to discount anything? How is this cheaper for the seller side, right? Like how is it worse for the seller side? Now there are some turmoil, like this is not an easy transition. So there will be things that it's not that clear of how they would completely benefit. But I think over a long period of time, the seller is just going to net more, right? It's just, think about if you're a company, if you all of a sudden had a way, or let's just even look at all the things that are happening with AI right now. If you had a way to do the same amount of work or keep more money by doing less or just some sort of structural thing, you think I'm just going to pass that on to a consumer? Or do you think I'm just going to pass that on to the individual if it's not needed? The answer is why? They just earn more, right? So that's the thing. Now, for the seller side, if you're a seller, you may be thinking, okay, should I even pay agents anything? And the answer is still likely yes. And why is that? It is still a competitive advantage for those that do, because think about it. At the end of the day, there are two sides of an equation when it comes to how much you net. You have one, which is the cost side of things. And all of the things that we're talking about is pure cost side of things, right? On the other side, there's still the ability to get outsized returns for what your home can be worth. Like, for example, I just helped a client close on their home in Milpitas. All the homes nearby sold for 1.7 or plus or minus there. We would have been really happy, to be fair, at 1.6 at the time. The home sold for 1,875. So you tell me, would the seller have, if they knew this in advance, would they have been willing to offer me a whole lot more on the cost side because they were netting literally 10% plus, right? So, but that's the challenge though, is that it's harder other than trust and track record. and understanding the process, right? So at the end of the day, all homes will sell in a range. I'm not a magician. I cannot make your $1 million home into $2 million unless I tore it down or something. But generally, I can't do these kind of extreme things. But I can push it into a specific range of what a home is worth. That's the skill on the seller side. How do you do that? You have a large funnel. You have a bigger distribution. You have people compete with one another. You have them rebid, right? So the reality is we had people rebid because we had a lot of close offers, and that generated extra tens of thousands of dollars in a matter of hours, right? So these are all levers that can increase your net result, which is very, very important. But those are the aspects of it, right? On the other end, the other reason why they would pay for it is, think about this. If you had a percent there, let's say it's 2.5%, 2%, it then removes that line item because it's also negotiation on the buyer side. Think about an offer today. You have many different line items, right? You have price, you have your terms, whether it's contingent or not, you have your down payment, you have the number of days to close, and you have the agent track record, which is important because of how are they just one transaction a year person, or do they do a lot? Like, do they know what they're doing? Can they handle their side of things? On the other hand, now you may have this line item, as we saw in the beginning, of the buyer commission side, and everybody could be different, right? It could be 2%, 1%, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, it's all like a net formula that a seller needs to calculate. Now we know that things are very competitive. So many homes may have 5+, 10+ offers. And now it's an individual item that everybody has to go through, right? So just because an offer is very similar at $1 million or whatever it may be, if they all have this thing, then you may have to do individual counters. You may have to have the conversation. Are they good with it? Can they increase to match that, right? It's another line item that needs to be negotiated or even factored in. And so that could then eliminate just that line item mess altogether, number one. Number two, for those that don't negotiate a good deal, right? It could also still allow those people to be more aggressive for that listing, right? Because if another agent, a buyer agent, wasn't specialized in being a buyer specialist, but they were like, hey, look, I'll just do whatever they're going to give me, whether it's 10 grand or $5,000 or 2.5%, they may be like, oh, wow, there's a 2.5% listing. I'm going to push really hard for my client on that one, right? And so they could do that. So that can motivate a stronger offers, right? So there's still reasons why they may still pay buyer's agents, but it will be a market-driven thing. Time will tell. We will see how it plays out. But these are the logical reasons, right? Trailhead, thank you for tuning in. Where will comp offers be clever per listing? There won't be, right? So the idea is there is no line item anymore. It just won't be there anymore. And so maybe it's in the private remarks. That's the question mark. If they're allowed to do that, I don't know the answer to that. Well, we will find out. So now going back to it, how does the buyer then pay the buyer agent? As I mentioned before, it will likely be outlined in the buyer rep agreement that needs to be established upfront for any private showings. So this means that the buyer will just how we have these strategy calls today, just really understand what are the options. And there could be a variety of choices, right? That I don't know the answer yet, but there could be a variety of choices. Some may offer multiple ones, just like a listing has. Like I said before, the listing had 3 different packages. Maybe there's something similar to buyers. I don't know the answer yet, but there could be a model of that. And that will be established, and there will be some norms for that. Now, so how does this impact? I would classify different categories: sellers, buyers, new construction. On the seller side, in my opinion, over a longer period of time, you guys should all of you homeowners should be able to net more. I don't know how long that will be, but over time, if this is this continues to be a certain way, which it has been for a long time, and really buyers are able to get buyers agents, or buyers are able to pay buyers agents, and that becomes the norm, then why wouldn't a seller be able to net more down the road? But the issue is in July, when they become live, it will be super messy. How would it not be a messy rollout, right? Because it's just going to be all over the place. You are all being educated right now in something that just occurred a few days ago. But how many of these conversations have you had with anybody yet? So imagine the 99.99% that are not talking to you about it, right? Like there is a lot of things that needs to unfold, right? So it'll just be incredibly messy how this will roll out on both sides, both sellers and buyers. Like this is not an easy situation when this is the biggest change in arguably in real estate history is about to occur, and there's no like ramp up period. It's just like, all right, there's going to be some artificial date. Somehow they're going to enforce this. I don't know, but that's their problem to figure out. I'm just trying to interpret this and just guide you to whatever we can do. So I think long term, sellers will be able to net more. Short term, it just be messy. You may or may not get a good number. I don't know the answer to that. Now, the buyer side, I don't think you're saving any more money, right? Like I mentioned before, how are you saving more money? Like, yes, you have choices to choose from, but you've always had choices to choose from. So what has changed, right? There's been plenty of discount brokers, discount agents there before. They've always been there. They came and gone. Many of them have straight up went out of business. Like you can see and remember those. You may have looked at your previous company that you worked with if there was a discount agent, and they or may not even be in business. So it's not like that model never existed. It existed for a lot, and quite frankly, they spent a lot of money marketing that messaging, and it still did not make it sustainable. So I think buyers in general, I feel kind of bad, especially those that don't have much money to put down as their down payment to begin with. Right? Like imagine if you're back in the day, and many of you are fortunate in a great position, and it's all of you that are working with me that are in the different price category and different parts of your life, it may not be as significant. But for those that you're getting your first place and you're putting like low money down, 3% down, 3.5% down, a VA loan, 0% down, right? Like these like money was already very tight to begin with. And if you have to pay an agent anything, it just makes it harder it's just harder and longer for you to get something, right? You might save up a little bit longer, right? Like these are all additional things that are way more difficult. Now, but even if you had more money, how would this save you money? The sellers are not going to be like, all right, here's, okay, you know what? Because the industry has changed, I'm going to discount everything by 2% or 2.5%. Yeah, right. Why would anybody do that? Like, are you like dreaming? Like, why would any seller or any homeowner do that? They'll be like, sweet, maybe I just won't. I'm just going to earn an extra 2.5%, whatever it may be, right? So I think it's just more challenging for buyers. So ideally, though, working with a good agent, we would structure it like how it has been for decades, which is it's a line item that the seller will ultimately still pay for, and it will be hopefully very similar to what you have been going through for the last few decades. But if it's not, then you have to also be mentally ready that there has to be some sort of compensation structure, right? That you will now pay out of pocket. And so suggestion, and this could be a real suggestion. So why wouldn't you just try to buy a place now with the current models in place, right? Like you don't have to pay anything quote unquote extra today, right? That's very important. That's something that you can do. And you should strongly consider, because if it does go any the other way, if people are all of a sudden say, look, I'm going to do straight up zero, and there's no open for negotiation of having the seller pay for it, you will be paying more out of pocket. So that's the idea. So Kevin, thank you for tuning in as usual. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Rewind the video. You'll be good. Christian, thank you for tuning in as always. Appreciate your support. Kevin, won't this change make buyers pay more now, 3% more than before since it's accelerated? So kind of at the beginning, there's a likelihood that the buyers may have to pay. I don't think all sellers agents will go to zero, right? I don't think that's like I would not even recommend that to sellers. At the end of the day, the goal is to get as much money as possible. So alienating a lot of the agent pool or the buyer pool is not going to be a good recipe. Right? You want to still have as wide of a funnel. Your funnel will not be as wide if you're going to be doing that way. Now, I don't think either way is going to be 3% plus anyways. Like it's not going to be that high. But either way, the buyer is the loser in this scenario, because even if they pay 1%, it's 1% more than they needed to do. They're not getting any discount or whatever the negotiation. Yeah. That's so no. Yeah, they will be paying more. That's the idea. It'll be coming from them. The interesting thing though is new construction. So how does new construction work today? Right? So new construction, their majority of builders, they do offer an agent a co-op, right? So they're just like a seller for most. If they bring in an agent, they will offer compensation for the agent. Now, the way that it works, though, and this is why I do a lot of new construction tours, is I need to go with you for the very first time. And the benefit of working with me is a combination of the pre-services and also the post-service. So what is the pre-service? I know a lot about these builders. I worked with most of them already before, many, many times. There are different levers that can be done that's not on the price perspective, right? So these are not publicly known or publicly available things, but they are still a material side of like the discounts that you can get. So they're like seller credits or like upgrades or these different things like that. And it also gives you another opinion about reading disclosures and knowing about the areas and then just trying to get the best possible. You will not get a better price by going direct. That's not how it works. Like there is no model like that. They're not going to be like, oh, I don't have to pay an agent something. I'm just going to give you the money. No, it goes back to what I just told the seller. If they don't have to pay the agent anything, they're just going to make more money. They don't need to give that to you. Like they don't need to negotiate that with you. The reason why they still do this is because at the end of the day, like agents like myself have more leverage. Just think about it. You are one buyer and you will likely be buying once every couple of years, and that's already fast. But me as a agent, like I have hundreds of buyers I work with every year. So there's a bigger chance I'm going to bring in multiple clients for a community. So that's repeat business. Is repeat business more valuable than a one-off business? And the answer is, heck yes, it is. Now, not all new construction pays agents though, right? There's a very famous one, which is NAR, that does not pay agents anything. Now, even NAR though, as an example, they do still pay agents for certain communities, the communities that don't sell well. So it's a supply and demand situation, right? Like different communities that are not selling well, they do pay agents. But they also have reduced it significantly through the years. Now, a lot of other builders have their own models, and it goes back to it. It's all supply and demand, right? It was all them deciding. So there are some communities that they offer no different than a seller, 2.5%. There are some communities that they offer a flat amount, right? And that's just how that's how it's done. Now, what will likely happen with that? Well, in general, I think they may just continue to reduce things, but I think it's also going to be following the same thing. They probably will be following supply and demand. But if you take a look at the stock market of the stocks of them, like the builder stocks, they have done better. When the news broke out on Friday, they actually had increased in their stock prices. So this is not investment advice, but that's the reality of why it increased. They're like, oh, look, maybe they don't have to pay as much. Right? Maybe they don't have to give out as much. And that's just more margin. Doesn't mean the buyer is getting a better deal. There's no mention of that at all. It just means they have bigger profits because it's a compression on the buyer's side, right? So that's the fundamental breakdown of how it all works. So this has been as I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of changes for this. This is not one and done. This will be updated throughout. And this is quite frankly also just a proposal right now for what what NAR is trying to settle with. So there may be additional things that may change. If there is any sort of meaningful updates from here, I will do another live stream. We'll talk about it here. But of course, feel free to leave in the comments. And as I mentioned, this could be a better time before some kind of chaos ensues in July to be buying or selling. Now, either way, whether you're going to be buying or selling, to be fair, it doesn't matter because spring is the busiest time all year anyways. But if this motivates you even earlier, then great, because it may. But regardless, whether you're going to be buying or not, there's clearly plenty of people buying and selling. It is springtime. People are trying to move because of schools, moving because of summertime. It is happening regardless. But if this motivates you a little bit earlier, these are some of the reasons why. Don't think you're going to get a better deal in July. On the buyer side for sure. And so love to have a strategy call with you. So if you found this video helpful, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, call or text me 408-547-4590. Let's go over a game plan. See you in the next video.